They faced up to 14 years in jail. They've been sentenced to 7 years behind bars. Outside the court in Yangon, the families, of course, were devastated. The foreign diplomats and the journalists were simply outraged. One of the two Reuters journalists, Wallon, said outside the court, "I have no fear. I've done nothing wrong. I believe in justice, democracy and freedom." And of course, Reuters is mobilized, fully mobilized with this case. The director for the Asia branch said that the government has the responsibility now to do the right thing. This is injustice, and we won't stop until we get our two journalists released and that they can enjoy again freedom. NGOs, of course, have been closely following this case. Human Rights Watch saying that this decision proves that the authorities in Myanmar are simply against critical thought and are worried, frightened about investigative journalists. Now, everyone close to those two journalists are hoping for a presidential pardon. That's the only way to get the two journalists free.
Indeed, because Clovis, this case took a long time to get to verdict, and indeed a lot of the reactions, as you say, they're really questioning the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press in Myanmar.
The two journalists have been behind bars since December. Many days behind bars already. Now they've been sentenced to 7 years in a case that's been marred with failures, discrepancies. They were investigating a massacre committed by soldiers against Rohingya civilians in a village in northern Rakhine. Later, the Myanmar army admitted that this massacre had taken place. Then you had a policeman, the policeman who arrested these two journalists, who testified, who said that this was all a setup, a trap, with his superior ordering him to give these sensitive documents to the two Reuters journalists. This whole case really raises questions regarding the freedom of the press and the freedom of expression in Myanmar. There was so much hope when Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel laureate, the human rights champions, if you will, rose to power. She's the de facto leader in the country. But when you look carefully at the situation, well, very little has changed. You've got several cases against journalists. Recently, you had journalists from a Turkish television network and Myanmar journalists who spent several weeks behind bars for simply flying a drone around the capital, Naypyidaw, not too far, it has to be said, from the parliament. So all of this really raises serious questions, and you can only think that the practices, the old practices of the military junta are still very much in place in Myanmar.